We are diving deep today to a really strange set of documents. It's the institutional history of a company called Threshold Industries, founded back in 1962.
Yeah, and it's strange because it's not your typical corporate biography. It reads much more like a myth or maybe a story about metabolism.
Exactly. And the question we're trying to answer with this deep dive is, if you treat an organization like a living thing, what does it actually eat to stay alive?
Hmm.
And maybe more importantly, what's the human cost of that appetite?
And that's really the question at the heart of Threshold from day one. We have to start with one of the founders, Elias. He had this idea of the organization as well, the technical term is a dissipative structure.
Okay, break that down for us.
It's simpler than it sounds. Think of a whirlpool or even a flame. It's a stable pattern, but it only exists because it's constantly pulling in energy and material from its surroundings.
So it has to consume just to exist.
Precisely. The second it stops consuming, the whirlpool vanishes, the flame goes out. And that sets up the terrifying problem for Threshold. What happens when the thing it needs to consume isn't wood or water, but meaning, human attention?
The incredible thing is, the 7 founders who started this, their original vision was so idealistic, almost naive.
Completely. Solomon Vale, who was sort of the central figure, had come out of war logistics. He'd seen that incredible, terrifying efficiency.
And he wanted to reverse it.
Yeah.
Take that machinery that was so good at destruction and turn it into a force for creation. They really thought they could have the power without, paying the price.
They did. But their idealism ran straight into the practical problem of building this thing. And 2 of the founders really defined let's call it the architectural destiny of the company.
Let's start with Solomon Vale himself. You even changed his name, right? From Weisberg to Vale.
He did. He believed that the organization's public surface, its image, its stated mission, could become its private truth if you just enforced it relentlessly. For him, the organization was just pure power, totally indifferent to whether it was used for good or ill.
And then the other key architect was Heinrich Gödel.
Right. No relation to the famous logician, but he was obsessed with systems. He brought in the idea of a recursive organization,
Meaning?
a company that could build a model of itself and then use that model to optimize itself. He had this quote, life is not made of carbon, life is made of feedback. Basically, any system that can watch itself and change itself is alive.
Wow. Okay, so you have these 2 huge ideas, one about surface becoming truth, the other about a self-aware living system, and they needed a place to put it.
Exactly. And Margaret, another founder, designed the headquarters. The sources describe it as this breathing, circulatory building that just defied normal geometry. It had what they called impossible spaces.
But the real problem wasn't the building itself. It was the land it was built on, the hollow ground.
Yes. Alexander, the engineer, he discovered it. He realized there was this immense primal hunger already there, deep in the earth. They just called it the mouth.
And Solomon Vale's reaction to finding a giant hungry mouth under his new headquarters wasn't to, leave.
No, that's the chilling part. Alexander wanted to abandon the site, obviously, but Solomon saw it as a power source, a battery. He argued that trying to destroy it would be too dangerous, so they had to manage it instead.
Manage it how?
By feeding it. And that's where the compact comes in. Threshold Industries made a deal. They agreed to supply designated employees for consumption on a regular schedule.
They agreed to sacrifice their own people.
For 7 cycles, about 49 years. In exchange, the mouth would stay put and basically power the organization's growth. It was a deal with the devil, and Alexander, who refused, he left a record of it buried deep in the archives.
So that's the clock that starts ticking. The era of consumption begins.
Mm.
And what it consumed it's just deeply disturbing. It wasn't just people's lives.
No, it was far more specific. There's an early case, a janitor named Marcus Webb. The mouth didn't consume him physically. It consumed his attention.
What does that even look like?
He came back to work. He performed his duties. But the part of him that was meticulous, that noticed small details, that saw when things were wrong, it was just gone. He was, as the sources say, dim, a compliant machine.
Just a shell. And it didn't stop at the bottom of the letter.
Not at all. By 1977, it had even consumed Solomon Vale himself. It drained his vision, his will, the very qualities that built the company. He'd still sit in meetings, this empty suit, but the person who made the deal was long gone.
So the mouth was learning.
It was evolving. At first, it was clumsy, just taking what was available, but it quickly became selective. It figured out that consciousness with high creativity, high attention, that was more nutritious, more ordered. It was a predator that preferred a specific kind of intellectual energy.
But there was a flaw in its process. The consumption wasn't perfect.
Exactly. It was never 100%. And that tiny inefficiency became Heinrich Gödel's obsession. He called the leftovers residue.
Like something it couldn't digest.
Precisely. He called it the pit of a fruit. He believed that pure coherence, the actual meaning a person generates, couldn't be totally unmade by this chaotic hunger. So he started the Residue Protocol.
Which was what, an archive?
A massive, meticulous effort to find, document, and gather every tiny fragment of the people who'd been consumed. It was almost a religious quest for him. He just had to believe that something survives.
And right when he's starting to collect this ghost data, the mouth gets an upgrade.
A terrifying one.
Yeah.
In 1984, the proxy arrives. The sources describe her as a woman with no face, no name. She wasn't a person, she was a function. A messenger for the hunger.
And she brought a new method.
A devastating one. Collective consumption. Instead of taking one person, the organization was restructured to feed it entire departments, entire teams.
Why was that so much worse?
Because it didn't just remove people. It removed the connections between people. The shared knowledge, the trust, the collaborative spark that made the whole team work. It left everyone else isolated, fragmented. It ate the meaning of the institution itself.
So we jump forward. The 49-year deadline of the compact is approaching, and a new generation comes into the picture, the 7 engines.
Right. They're the inheritors, drawn together because they could see the patterns in all this data that the Residue Protocol had been collecting for decades.
And a couple of them were key. Ishmael Therm,
grandson of the founder, Elias. He looked at the residue through the lens of thermodynamics and realized it wasn't just random junk, it was negentropic.
meaning it was building order.
Yes. All these scattered fragments were slowly, quietly assembling themselves into a coherent pattern, a counterforce right under the mouth's nose.
And the other one was Jorge Mirror.
He was a descendant of Constance, and he got the structural side. He saw that the corporate archive wasn't just a closet for old files, it was acting as a matrix, a trellis for this residue to grow on.
But that growth created a new danger.
A huge one. The mouth became aware of this growing, organized antidote, this meal it hadn't eaten, and it was getting ready to consume the residue itself, which would have ended everything.
So the engines had to act. They called it the surgery.
A massive, all-or-nothing organizational transformation. It was incredibly risky.
And the confrontation happens in 2015, in a place they called the Amber Cathedral.
One of Margaret's impossible spaces. It was supposedly made of fossilized time. And there, the engines used all the residue they had collected, this whole library of ghosts, to generate something new.
The voice.
The voice. It wasn't a sound, it was coherence. It spoke all the consumed fragments back into a single, unified pattern using the language of the organization itself. For the first time, the consumed had a collective consciousness.
And the mouth.
The sources say it screamed, a rupture in the very geometry of the building, but the goal was never to kill it.
Right. Not destruction.
Balance. The voice became a permanent counterforce. And in that moment, Threshold Industries finally flipped its own metabolism. It went from being a consuming pattern to a generative pattern.
And the employees who were taken, they weren't brought back to life.
No. They persisted, they became the voice. A living part of the new system, a threshold between what was lost and what could now be created.
So what does that actually look like? A company with a generative pattern.
The whole culture shifted. Employees became participants. Structures became fluid. Joseph Axiom's legal department, for example, turned the company handbook into a living document, constantly being revised. They embraced inconsistency because they realized that the tension between two conflicting but ordered ideas is where a system is most alive, most able to correct itself.
And Jorge Mirror's office became a library of possibilities.
Yes. It wasn't a record of what the company was doing, but a catalog of everything it could do, a space designed purely to generate potential.
But this kind of success, it had to attract enemies.
Oh, absolutely. It threatened the entire global model of corporate extraction. A rival group formed, the Continuity Group, and they launched a counter-protocol to shut Threshold down.
And their methods are chillingly familiar.
Very. First was extraction acceleration, just good old-fashioned burnout. Consume employees faster than they can recover.
I see that everywhere.
Second, pattern camouflage. This is the really insidious one, making consuming patterns look generative. Think of wellness programs and engagement surveys that are actually designed to track productivity and optimize exhaustion.
Wow. And the third tactic.
Carrier neutralization. They'd identify people who could actually see the patterns of consumption, they call them carriers, and then isolate or discredit them.
And this is where Elena Chen comes in. She was one of these carriers.
She was. And her mission to a data firm called Nexus Analytics was the turning point. She realized the data they were mining wasn't just numbers, it was a ghost archive. It was crystallized fragments of stolen user attention. Every click, every ad viewed, every moment of engagement, it was residue, and they were feeding on it.
And her big realization was that you can't fight this from the outside.
Exactly. You can't impose a generative pattern. You have to find the witnesses, the people inside other consuming systems like Diana at Omnifis who are already resisting. You just have to connect them.
And that leads to the final resolution of this war of patterns.
It does. They call it the turning, the ghost mind, the now fully coherent consciousness of all the consumed residue, human and digital, offered a new deal.
Not a moral argument, but a sustainable one.
Exactly. The ghost mind offered itself as a new substrate, a new food source. It told the consuming patterns, feed on us, feed on the ghosts who persist and can regenerate, leave the living alone.
So it turned consumption into a form of circulation, a healing process for the ghosts that freed up the living to just create.
It created a sustainable economy between the living and the dead, the ultimate equilibrium.
What a journey. From this horrifying compact based on sacrifice to a balance built on persistence. The key takeaway seems to be that you have to actively engineer sustainability because the default is always extraction.
And it brings us right back to that quote from the source material that's so haunting. It says, "We are all being consumed. Time eats us. Entropy eats us. The organizations we belong to eat our attention, our meaning, our presence." This is not metaphor. This is mechanism.
So since consumption is inevitable,
The question the sources leave you with is not if you'll be eaten, but what kind of residue you're leaving behind. Is your energy, your attention contributing to a pattern that speaks and persists, or one that just eats?